Clicker. So Karen just laid out an incredible vision for us about what it would be like for our content to talk to each other and to be delivered in the right channel to the right audience. And so I just wanted to take a step back here for a second. So please raise your hand if you are involved in creating or managing content for your organization, and leave your hands up. And welcome to the virtual audience here as well. And you can raise your hands in your minds. Please raise your hand if you are involved in measuring content for your organization. Good, a few more hands. And finally, please raise your hand if you wish your organization did a better job of creating, planning, and measuring content. Great. So that's pretty much all of us both in the room and virtually. And this talk is primarily for all of you here. It's for those of us who create content, plan it, manage it, measure it, promote it, all of that. But there's another important audience for this talk, which is all the people who aren't here. Your peers, your colleagues, your bosses. They need to hear these messages too, and I'm hoping that you will, hold on, let's see, how do I do this? Did it change? The slide did not change. It did? People, yes. What? Did it change? It didn't change here. Sorry. Now it did. Okay. Sorry. So I hope you'll be able to share some of these ideas with them. And I wanted to start with a question of why. So why aren't our organizations, did I go back? Sorry about that. Next slide. Up. Up is next. Down is next. Aha. All right, so why aren't our organizations here already? Right? Why aren't we already creating content with the vision that Karen described? And from my perspective, before this is a technical challenge, before it's a digital challenge, and frankly, before it's even a content challenge, this is a people challenge. People, which one? Why? Thank you. Sorry about that. So this is a people challenge, hence the title of my talk, Managing the Politics of Content. So today I wanted to spend a few minutes talking to you about what this looks like in many of our organizations, why it exists, and how to get through this big challenge. And it starts with the word content. So content's actually kind of a terrible word, because while we in this room think of everything we do as content, our colleagues don't. Our colleagues are product developers, they're product managers, they're sales professionals, or marketers, or instructional designers, or whatever the subject matter that they are in charge of, that's what they do. And they don't think of the output of their work as content. And so that's our first hurdle. That's where a lot of the politics come from. So while we know that they're in the content business, they don't. And I really struggled with, so how do I get that point across to the clients that I work with, who are really content-rich organizations like associations, intranets, higher education, those kinds of organizations. And this is what I came up with, and it keeps going black. Content is the way that our work is manifested in the world. And I hope that that helps a little to get across, and I say this almost as a mantra and invite you to do the same. Content represents the way our work is manifested in the world. And therefore, your work is content. The way it gets out there in the world is words and pictures and audio and video. And so it takes both of us. It takes subject matter expertise and it takes content expertise to ensure that the work we do gets out there in the world in a way that will help the organization and each individual program or initiative reach its goals, and help, more importantly, help the audience reach the goals that they have and the needs that they've got. So sorry to be referring to my notes, but there's certain points that I want to make sure that I get across. So content doesn't stand outside of our organization's work. But if content is our products, our services, programs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, pretty quickly, when it comes to the people who are creating all this stuff, they think of it like this. It's my stuff. It's the things that I am responsible for my job. And from our perspective, you know, and of course they feel ownership because that's, again, their job. From our perspective, it looks like this. And sometimes, so there's a disconnect, right, between what we see as content and they see as content, and we get political. So I used to start this talk with Rock'em Sock'em Robots, and yet we have to understand why this exists. And it doesn't exist because people want to be in conflict with you. It doesn't exist because they are malicious. They're just trying to do their jobs. And so an important way to think about this, and one way to get around it, not to get around it, but get past it and through it together, is by acknowledging that content strategy and content is really an HR issue. People do what's in their job description, and they do what they think they're supposed to do, which sets up this dynamic of friction unless we can work together and get past that. And people have their own goals and their own measures, and that's currently what they're working on. People are, you know, is it in their job description not only to manage the program, but to write the content about the program? Well, we don't know sometimes. Sometimes it very much is, and they're sort of on one side of that spectrum, and sometimes they pass over a list of bullet points and say, here, content people, you take care of it. So I've seen both extremes, and neither one is exactly the most effective. And sometimes content owners think they have to go it alone, and go it alone in terms of thinking about only what they do in a vacuum and not at all considering what other people are creating about that product, about that topic for that same audience. And therefore, you know, it's going to hang out there to dry, sort of, because it doesn't necessarily connect with the other content that the organization is producing. And it also doesn't connect with your ability to help their work become more effective. So they think they're responsible for kind of soup to nuts, to everything, whether it's in their job description or not. And they feel responsible for doing everything from setting the business goals to choosing the social media channels or newsletters or web pages or wherever it is, or which app that they're going to use, and think of everything regarding what they're doing. So our colleagues have deep subject matter expertise that we don't. They have expertise, deep, decades-long, often, expertise in creating a program. So that's their expertise. But we don't have their expertise, and they don't have our expertise. And again, that's where the friction is. So when conversations get stressful, I invite you to take a moment of Zen. And I want you to promise me that you will do this. So how do I make this play? Let's try that. So literally take a moment of Zen right now. So this for me is a special place, Palm Springs, and it was lovely sound. And do that. Close your eyes and take a couple of breaths when your situation gets stressful, and think of a place of peacefulness for you, and go into any conversation from that place of peace instead of thinking about it sort of as that Rock'em Sock'em Robots. And it's not always easy. Trust me, I lived with this situation. I managed a website with 23 departments that all had a different sense of who our audiences were and had different priorities, and mine is number one, no, mine is number one, and it was a very stressful job to have. So I've certainly lived with that. but I have some ways through it. So we've just taken a pretty quick and kind of sympathetic view about why people feel that sense of ownership and why we're in that place of friction. So I have 5 tips, and here they are. So the first one is listen. Sit down with the folks who are creating the content, the folks who are the subject matter experts, and listen to them. Really understand what their goals are, what their challenges are, and often we haven't taken that time. We assume we know. We know what we know about their work and about them, but we don't really. And so I find that a lot of that internal friction is because we don't even know each other. We don't talk to each other, we don't regularly meet, and we don't understand their challenges. So there's a technique called compassionate listening by Thich Nhat Hanh. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And it's listening with only one purpose, to help the other person, as he says, empty their heart. So to just listen. Don't defend, don't, even talk yet, but start with listening. And that opens things up tremendously, more than you might think. Hold on, where am I? And have empathy. Really understand that they're just doing their jobs. The second technique that I find works really, really well is to understand the audience. So I use this photo in almost every presentation I give because what it represents is each of our individual series of sets of expertise coming together on the same side of the table with the audience on the other side. And not only on the other side, we're championing them and celebrating them and really honoring who they are and where they're coming from. Our challenge in doing that, or the reason for that, and so we do that with empathy-based personas, which I don't know if you've heard of. It's a way to gather people together to put their own job titles aside and work together to build a picture of the top priority audience and think through their motivations, their challenges, their opportunities, and really what's keeping them up at night. And once we do that work together, it's an amazing silo-busting exercise, actually. And if we don't, we start with this quote from Anais Nin: "We do not see things as they are, we see things as we are." So how are we getting past that? Here's another quote that I really like, and I'll talk about for a second about the importance of translation. So the quote is, "Users don't care about your org chart." And it's from Lou Rosenfeld. Who here in this room does not know who Lou Rosenfeld is? A few folks. So this is important because when I first put this quote in the presentation, I didn't attribute who Lou Rosenfeld is. He's a household name. Everybody knows who he is, right? Famous guy in my world, but not in your world necessarily. So Lou Rosenfeld is basically the person who invented information architecture. He wrote information architecture for the web, and he invented this whole profession. So I put his name in there. But I wanted to put that out there too. It's a really important job of content presentation and content expertise is doing that translation for the audience. And when somebody's expertise is that deep, they don't know that the audience doesn't live in their heads. They don't really know that the audience doesn't know what they know. And that's a perspective that the content expert can really bring in. So the third tip is to cultivate a spirit of partnership. And partnership is this thing we've been talking about, right? Subject matter expertise on one side, content expertise on the other side. And when we do that, it's typically not a one-to-one, at least in the clients I work with. Our organizations offer tons of different things, right? So the content expertise sits in the middle, but it touches course developers, sales, marketing, product development, all of the work that the organization does. And it's not even a small number, it's often a really big number. So a big number of series of expertises. But yet, if content presentation just sits in the middle, we're not taking full advantage of where we could go. But if we sit on the outside and we're not only developing relationships from us to each department, from us to them and them to us, but really we achieve the most success when we facilitate information sharing among them. And that's the ecosystem piece that we're going to talk a ton more about during the course of this conference. So it's expertise from any one group to the others. And by knowing the content, we sit outside of the fiefdoms, we sit outside the silos, and we can really help build all of those networks of connections. And this is a really important role that we can play, that then we're helping not only what they asked us to do, but taking everyone to that next step. So we can see our work as a cell. So the cells, so imagine it's this one on the left, or pick a cell that you see any of these blobs on the page. And let's see. So if I click, will it go to the website, Felice? We'll see. All right, we'll try. If not, I'll take you to the next step anyway. All right. So this is actually part of a painting. That screenshot I just showed you is part of a painting by a guy named Chuck Close. And Chuck Close is an expert in, so let's see, let's go to the computer. So let's zoom back. You see the cells. Are you controlling the mouse or am I? Okay. Let's just move on. So each cell actually becomes part of a much bigger whole. And this is the painting. Nope. Thank you. This is the painting. So you can see each of the cells. If we zoom way back, and the website was supposed to let us interact with it, but if we zoom way back, this is what you see. And this is everyone's work. It succeeds only when it's part of a bigger whole. So the whole of what the organization creates is really what the customer is looking for. They don't come looking for marketing information. They may come for technical documentation or support content, but it's usually because they have an unanswered question that somebody else along the game of post office that constitutes our workflow, our communications workflow internally, really gets to. So they wanted this. They didn't want the one cell. They wanted the full picture. So once we can show our peers and colleagues that, then we have an opportunity to go to the next step, which is to co-create the solution. So the answer is to work with the colleagues and with the subject matter experts to, after we've had the conversation about them and their goals, and had other conversations about sharing us what we need and our challenges and our goals, let's figure out a solution that works for everybody, because it's in our customers and our audience's best interest to work for everybody. Another metaphor that I really like to use that I think will help a ton is that of an orchestra conductor. So I like to say that a content strategist is like an orchestra conductor. In an orchestra, if the violins and the tubas and the timpani were doing their own thing in their own way at their own time, it is noise. It's pure cacophony. And yet, if a conductor comes in and has everybody start at the same time and play the same piece of music, they're part of that. It's far deeper and richer than it could possibly have gotten alone. And in the same way, what our organizations do has to be out there orchestrated so that it isn't cacophony to the audience. And then the final thing is to change your perspective. So this might look like any old cityscape. You know, it's nice skyline, but it's actually this. So this is a piece of art that's in Aarhus, Denmark, that I was lucky enough to see last year. That's me in the lower left-hand corner. And it hangs from the ceiling. It's created upside down, and it really does help you change your perspective of how you're looking at things, and that was the artist's goal. So we're currently, or let's say in the past, we all, both us and our subject matter experts colleagues, we work from a place of control. We are married too much to the how, and we think a lot about our ownership and our territorial nature of the content that we have from the programs we have And it really is from a place of fear. Fear that I won't get the bonus, fear that I won't get promoted, fear that I won't keep my job, any of that fear. Instead, if we work together, all of our work is going to be more successful, and we can all succeed, and more importantly, so can the audience. And then it's from control to collaboration. It's from thinking about how to working together, thinking about, well, here's what you want to do. Let's work together to figure out that how together. And from ownership to partnership, and finally from fear to freedom. So those are my takeaways from you today, for you today. So I leave you with go forth and make progress. Thank you.